First of all, there were the frightening and indeed gruesome murders occurring in Chedrin Park with reports of police shootouts and police shooting at police, and statements, conflicting statements from different members of the security forces high command, the police high command. This is the first of a series of Fridays Live that we hope to have, and so that we can share some thoughts about events taking place in our country. Last week, events really revealed the depth of the crisis that our country is facing. First of all, there were the frightening and indeed gruesome murders occurring in Chedrin Park with reports of police shootouts and police shooting at police, and statements, conflicting statements from different members of the security forces high command, the police high command, and most significantly, there were allegations that there is a hit squad of police operating in the communities or in the force. 2 days after those shootings occurred, there was the declaration of the state of emergency in Hanover, St. James, and Westmoreland because crime had again become uncontrollable, particularly in St. James. On the same day that the state of emergency was declared, the long-awaited report of the Contractor General, former Contractor General, was put in the Parliament, and it has many worrying details about the waste of public resources. At the same time, academic staff at UTech have been forced to strike because of the non-payment of their agreed wages, while I have to say that too many people in the corporate area are unable to hold a fresh any morning because there is just no water. Children are out of school, skin diseases are spreading, and there's just general discomfort that people are experiencing. I want to deal with each of these issues as we go along because they're all connected. But before doing so, I really want to thank those of you who have tuned in, those who are supporters, those who are just interested, those who are concerned about what we have to do in the country. And I'm going to try my best to answer your questions when you have them and to be able to shed light on some of our perspectives about these particular problems. The first thing is with what occurred at Chedrin Park. You have police shooting at police, and some police are in fact accused of carrying out murders and certainly breaking the law. Then you have another element of that problem, which is that there are different statements coming from the Commissioner of Police and from a Deputy Commissioner of Police. In this matter, quite frankly, we need to have an independent inquiry. Jackson, the Shadow Minister of National Security, has already called for an independent commission of inquiry in this matter, and I want to urge the authorities to move in that direction. This goes beyond an INDECOM report, because INDECOM really is to look simply at police misconduct and whether someone was guilty of an unlawful killing within the police force. That's essentially what the INDECOM Act provides for. They can make recommendations from time to time. But the whole question of the breakdown of the command and control structure in the Jamaica Constabulary Force is something that goes beyond the scope of INDICOM and something that the police cannot be expected to do for themselves. We can't ask the police in this circumstance to investigate itself. And the country cannot feel confident if there are persistent reports coming first of all out of the recent court case about killings that took place in Clarendon and supposed death squads, coming on the back of lots of rumors about killings that took place at stadium and elsewhere where police were to have been involved. We need to get to the heart of occurrences like this. No country can operate with a sound security system if we can't have confidence in the integrity of our security forces and in the integrity of the leadership of our security forces. And the questions that arise need to be answered now by some independent body. This situation is not unconnected to the need for a declaration of the state of emergency in Western Jamaica. Let me make it clear, the government, any government, would have the need to do something urgent given the levels of crime which occurred and which are occurring in Western Jamaica. So we support the government's exercise of its prerogative to declare a state of emergency. In fact, we have been calling long before the state of emergency for the government to use the zones of special operations legislation, which is a crime-fighting security measure, to a much greater extent than they have been doing. Now, we said, why not declare the entire St. James as a zone of special operations? It would have given you the joint command, it would have allowed detentions, but you'd have had to carry the people detained before a judicial body to explain why. And it's not a question of the judgment of innocence or guilt before a court, but there would be an independent oversight. That's provided for in that law. And at the same time, you would have been able to do all the other things that you can do under a state of emergency, except for unlimited and arbitrary detention. We asked for that. We said when after 1 year and more that there were only 2 Zozo, that is not what we expected. There are more places that need a Zozo. Even now, with the state of emergency in Western Jamaica, we still believe that greater use needs to be made of the zones of special operation legislation. Many people believe a zone of special operations and the state of emergency is the same thing. It's not. We have said that a state of emergency is not a crime-fighting instrument. It's not meant for the long term. The zone of special operations legislation can operate in the long term, and it does include social intervention measures that have to be part of the program, which give the possibility of a long-term solution to the problem. Because the most worrying thing about the arrangements that have taken place, the need for arrangements, new arrangements of a state of emergency in Western Jamaica, is that it shows how inadequate the follow-up measures have been in St. James following the initial declaration of a state of emergency more than a year ago. Because the simple fact that after having a state of emergency for more than a year, that you're in a position where the criminality could revive itself to such a level, what it meant is that not enough was done to build cases against the violence producers in St. James, and the other criminal organizations operating in St. James. Not enough was done to build information on the gangs so that the anti-gang legislation could be used more effectively. It demonstrates also that there was not enough international cooperation to ensure that you had the intelligence about these organized crime groupings, because, you know, quite frankly, organized crime in Jamaica and in the world as a whole is inevitably transnational crime. That is to say, crime taking place across borders between Jamaica and America, for example, in the scamming business or in the drug export business. It always means something that is international in scope. And that means you have to have international cooperation to decide where you're going to lock up some of these criminals, to collect the information that other countries have on your own criminals, so that you can make an attack on this problem. Guns are coming from other countries. They come here. Other countries have the information. We need to have better intelligence as well. We need an intelligence law. When we had the state of emergency, it would appear, just given the speed with which the problem reoccurred, is that much of that early work was not done. We have to make certain this time around that we don't end up in the same place, because without that, what we're really saying, if you don't make any efforts to remove the criminals on the long term, bringing them to justice, lock them up in a court of law, then what you're really saying that is you're going to have a state of emergency forever. And that, quite frankly, is unacceptable in any country that values its democratic rights. So, there's a connection between that condition and what occurred in the afternoon of the same Tuesday when the state of emergency was declared, because what that showed was that the government of Jamaica, in selling property of the people of Jamaica, was willing to give up more than $1 billion of public money, public resources, in the land deal that took place around the Rooms property in Ocherius. Now, there's a lot of propaganda going about. I see people taking out ads in newspaper to say nothing never go wrong and how much taxes were linked to it. But there is nothing to say that the property could not have been sold at the price that the independent valuators had set. These are not fly-by-night companies doing the valuation. They know that the property is only of value if you're going to make a development with it. But they believe that was the market price. We are going to have more to say about this later. But there are some other things that can be said now. First of all, we have the fact that money was lost. There was no tender of the properties. Going to tender don't mean that you have to sell the property at the tender price, but it will give you an idea of what price the market could bear. And so, if the valuations was right and there was this $1 billion that was lost, then we would be able to certify that we could have got the $1 billion extra for the property. 4 million or thereabout, or little more than 4 million US dollars. We have the case also, you know, and I wanted to think what $1 billion could do. It could buy you more than 1,000 police cars, and we're talking about how you get control of crime. It couldn't fix the situation in many of our hospitals, if not all, where you go to a hospital and I tell you you need an x-ray, but the x-ray equipment not working, the MRI equipment not working. It could fix the problems of building fresh school classrooms so we could take all our schools off the shift system and give our students in the country, our children, a fair deal about doing all of this. It could fix so many roads in so many communities. It could solve a lot of the water problems that we have in different parts of the country, particularly in parts of the corporate area, Lower St. Andrew. And then, most of all, let's face the fact that what the Contractor General has said is that the ministers, in this instance, the minister without portfolio, Darryl Vaz, and the Prime Minister who was chairing the cabinet were the persons who had conduct of the negotiations. That is contrary to all the rules of governance in our country. Negotiations like that belong either to the officials, the public officials in the UDC board, and most often it has been the responsibility of an enterprise team. This government used an enterprise team to finalize the Cayman Spark divestment. One was set up from the previous administration. They did that. They used an enterprise team to settle on the divestment of the Norman Manley Airport. The question is, why was there direct ministerial involvement in this? It's wrong, and we need to go further. But I will deal with that later on in the week coming. But the important thing now is to understand that money was lost. Public resources were sold below the valuation price. And we have no evidence to suggest all that they're telling us about taxes that would be paid and taxes that employment that could be had. Don't lose sight of the fact that the Ministry of Finance, that is the main economic and financial advisor to the government of Jamaica, objected when the matter came before the cabinet. That's the important fact that needs to be borne in mind. And they were overruled by a minister, and as a consequence, money that could be used to pay the staff at UTEC, or could be used to fix up our security forces even more, or could be used to fix our roads in our communities, was lost.
Okay, Dr. Phillips, so we have some questions coming in, generated from some of the things that you mentioned a while ago. We're going to jump to a question from Tommy GMC. Tommy, thanks for dropping this one. It asks, what are your plans? How can you assist in a crime-fighting plan to save Jamaica? What we need are solutions.
Well, we have said, first of all, in fact, the government agreed with us when we met in January, that we need to engage the rest of the society in a dialogue. Crime fighting inevitably requires that we bring all the people, all the stakeholders involved in the situation with crime, so we can share ideas. We had agreed on a date when we would meet. The private sector had agreed, the churches had agreed that they would be part of it. Members of the civil society organizations had agreed, the government canceled the date. We believe also that we need better intelligence, but it needs to have a proper act, legislation to prevent abuse. We believe that we should improve the legislation generally. Our team, led by Senator Donna Scott Motley, has been meeting with the government's team to look at legislation which could make the police more effective in fighting crime. At the same time, there is the need for a reform of the JCF, and the reform plan is already provided for the most part. It was left after a national review of the JCF, which was completed early in 2007, and in fact reviewed by the Golding administration. Time has passed, it could be updated, but certainly now we think that the reform of the police force, the leadership needs to be done. And at the same time, I think that we should have targeted investigations like we had when Kingfish was operating and which Mocha used to do, where you identify the main violence producers, the criminal organizers of the main criminal enterprises, and go after them one by one. When you have identified one, you build a case around that one. You scour the earth for evidence, including other jurisdictions, including what the Americans can tell you, the Canadians can tell you, our Caribbean partners, what our South American partners in Colombia can tell you, for example, or Panama or Mexico, where many of these groups operate. Bring the information together and decide where you're going to try them, whether by extradition or you're going to try them in a Jamaican court, wherever there's a preponderance of evidence. That's how we got rid of the cocaine trade, and we can get rid of these violence producers like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tammy.
We have some other questions coming in. Lincoln Evans says, "Sir, I would like to see the party put out a well-detailed economic and growth development plan and a workable healthcare plan, an education plan, and most of all, a well-thought-out and workable national security plan that can counter what we have now." So you spoke about security, but...
Well, thank you very much, Lincoln. Let me say this. I want to remind that we have established 3 commissions in the party that have been working, and we have put out some elements of our thinking in relation to small businesses, in relation to the land and housing problem in the country, and in relation to small businesses. We need to, and in relation to education also. I'm not going to be able today to deal in detail with all of these areas, but let me say, the major problem that we have in the country is that we still have 2 Jamaicas to too great an extent. You still have, in education, for example, 1 set of high performance schools, which is about 45, and you have another set, the vast majority, 118 that are underperforming. The major challenge that we have in the education field is how we're going to get all the underperforming schools moving up to the same level as the high-performing schools. That is going to mean resources, financial resources. But more than financial resources, it is going to mean leadership resources and management resources. We think, for example, that we are going to have to mobilize all of the grade 1 principals and the teachers who have a high performance record and have them not leave the classroom but become advisors, mentors, and consultants in the targeted schools that we're going to have to raise. Again, we believe in the politics of participation, and that and that we will be able to, we can only deal with this problem if we are able to mobilize the communities and the helpful citizens to be able to take charge of the schools in the same way that the name brand schools have alumni, old boys or old girls associations that log on and take care of them. We want all the other schools to have the parishes taking control of them. We don't want just trickle down in the economic terms. We want to focus attention on the small business community and the micro enterprise community that is being left behind. I'm going to urge all of you, when you go around Jamaica again, open the eyes. Look and see how many sidewalk garages you see. Look and see how many people with doing cabinet making under mango tree and breadfruit tree cut up in a community. Look at how many of the dressmakers have 5 or 6 people that are on a back veranda somewhere, just doing a work with a tarpaulin to hold off the sun. We believe that a special effort must be made to channel resources, and we have ways of getting those resources to these small businesses. We think we need to provide the business space that can be rented at affordable rates by these businesses. We need to assist them to get modern with accounts and business plans, because we will only get the 4 and 5% growth that we need to really change the quality of life in this country when we bring the majority of the producers, these small businesses and micro enterprise, within the framework of the financial system of the country, so they can borrow money at affordable rates, can get the real assistance that makes them modern. We need to provide them support where they're going into export operations. We need to be able to have JAMPRO reconfigured so that we are amalgamating many small businesses to move forward. And then I want to say, finally for this morning, that the central problem of land and ownership needs to be addressed frontally. This is a problem that has been around from the end of slavery. People who live in squatter communities is not because they're workless and not try. It's because they can't get access to the resources. All of the families, their families, have worked long and hard in this country. 60% of the small farmers producing in Jamaica have no title to their land. 1/3 of our population live in so-called squatter community. We need to take the land locked up in government's hands, make it available, and give title to the people who are our Jamaican people. I'm not saying they must get it for free, but they must get it within our generation, and at a meaningful price that takes account of the sweat equity of generations of Jamaicans who have contributed to this country. And I want finally on this matter to say, if any one of you listening who have ideas that you want to share with us about how we could build a Jamaica that gives an opportunity to every Jamaican, that build a Jamaica that works for all the people who have been left behind, you can send those ideas to us at feedback@levelupjamaica.com, because we're anxious to get your ideas. And we're anxious also, and we're going to be coming across the country, town hall meetings in all the constituencies, so we can share ideas with you over the next few months.
Our next question comes from Davion, who's in the USA, from Instagram. He asks about Ruel Reid. When will the country hear more about why he was fired?
I can't answer that question, Davion, because quite frankly, the Prime Minister of Jamaica should have said so to the people of Jamaica. And quite frankly, the people of Jamaica need to make their voices heard. Obviously, when we held our press conference and called for the Auditor General to go into the Ministry of Education, the Prime Minister acted the day after to demand the resignation, which meant that he already knew, he, the Prime Minister, already knew that things were bad in the ministry. The police have been investigating from reports that we have. Other agencies in the security system have been investigating. What this reveals, and I mentioned a while ago that we have 2 Jamaicans. Because the other day up in Stirling Castle, when there was a murder, they lock up people. Have them in lockup and say they're not calling them suspects yet. Yet when there is clear evidence that money has been missing in a ministry because the supposed suspects are people in high society, they can't get even taken to the station. It is that kind of double standard that causes people to say that there's too much injustice in Jamaica. And quite frankly, until we deal with that feeling of injustice, that valid feeling of injustice that too many people experience, we're not going to create a kind of nation where we can have a consensus about how we lift up and spread opportunity to the majority of our people. But that is something that we have to deal with. Yes.
Okay, so we have another question from David Williams, and he's also asking about suggestions here for the implementation of a subvention between the universities. So what solution can be implemented regarding the subvention issue at universities? And 2, why is it that the party stopped the PNP Back to Basic tour? So this one directly related to our engagement in the communities.
Well, let me say we have not stopped. Remember, there have been events, by-elections and conference and things that have come around. But we certainly intend over the next few weeks, with the question of people's rights as was highlighted in the NIDS judgment, and the question that now comes to the forefront again about the nature of our security forces and the arrangements, we intend to be on the road again regarding all of those issues and having dialogue in the communities. I also, with relation to the university issues, I think the strike of academic staff at UTech highlights, first of all, the need for the government to budget properly, to pay the monies that are needed to operate our universities. There's a long-standing question, and I'm not certain what you're really pointing to when you talk about the subvention problem, but there's a long-standing question as to whether the resources that are needed for the education of our students should be provided to the student who matriculates or to the universities. And we are exploring that issue now inside of the party, because really one body of opinion, which I support, but the mechanics of how to do it arises, is that we should be making a commitment to every student who matriculates. We might be able to provide all that is needed in the first instance, but that student would be free to use that voucher, if you want to call it that, to decide whether they're going to UWI, they're going to go to UTech, they're going to go to NCU or some other university. That would give the student greater freedom to deal with their particular interests in studying, and would make the universities more responsive to the students' demand. But there are lots of things like our regional commitments that have to be explored in relation to UWI, like how we would ensure that in other areas the direct support for research activity and other things can be dealt with. So we hope in the course of the next few months to resolve that problem. But our ultimate objective in the People's National Party is to ensure that every single student can ultimately get university education if they qualify without having to pay. That's our objective. Quite frankly, the budget can't bear that now. But I want no one to be in doubt as to what the ultimate policy objective of the People's National Party is. And that is where we want to get to. In the meantime, we are going to be doing quite a lot to ensure that there's greater access to the Student Loans Bureau and to reduce the sets of burdens that students have in having to pay for that. So the truth is that these are the most urgent tasks in keeping with our objective to get to this point where the education is free for everyone. We have said that we are going to deal with giving a scholarship, full scholarship, to the first in any family who gets university education. The first in the family. That means if the parent, I don't mean the first child. If the parent has had a university education before, then that family wouldn't qualify. But what we are trying to do is to give every family, or as many families as possible, an opportunity to benefit from the prospect of improved earnings and improved social capital and social value that comes from having a member of the family with a university education. So these are our basic commitments. These have always been the values of the People's National Party. From the very first time in 1957 when Norman Manley opened up the traditionalized schools, so ordinary Jamaican children from families that were not wealthy could afford to go with what was called then the Common Entrance Examination. All through the years, when Michael Manley introduced free education up at the university, but which was not sustained, these have been our values as a party, and we intend to fulfill the objectives in our time. Thank you for today.
Our final question comes from Donald Thompson. What is the plan to stop the mass migration of teachers and nurses? Plus, what's the plan for better health resources?
Well, quite frankly, we can't stop people from moving. But what we can do is to ask people if they have been trained, especially in our institutions, and if they have borrowed money from student loan, etc., to get training. We can say to them, give us some years of service in exchange for the write-off of your loan portfolio or some part of your student loan portfolio. We're going to have to see also if we can train more people, make more opportunities for training, because the truth is, going all the way back to the 19th century, we have had many people seeking better places, better opportunities overseas. Also, even though we may not be able to match the level of pay offered in other jurisdictions, we certainly have to address the issue of pay, particularly for our teachers and our health workers, because not only are they high quality, But if we recognize that our best human resource is our people, then we need to reward this human resource. And at the same time, we need to be able to get the benefit of the trained population in our country, our society, and our economy. But all of this has to be done with vigor. And I want to say something. That's why we have to build a national spirit. And it is because of our belief in the importance of the spirit of collective endeavor, which is why Michael Manley said, let's put work into Labor Day. Labor Day is coming very shortly, because we believe that we have to combine our energies. We have to emphasize our commitment to each other and to the country and to the upliftment of the country. And that passion thus generated will be something that will help the country progress. So even as we're dealing with the pay for teachers, and that's why we feel we are so strongly in support of the teachers at UTEC, because quite frankly, the government agreed to pay them and has not paid them. And you have to be reliable. There's another point about the UTEC situation, which I want to emphasize too, which is simply that we need a Minister of Education, a full-time Minister of Education. This thing of having Carl Samura, who may be the most well-intentioned guy, minister, man, overseeing housing, overseeing education, and just kind of pinch hitting, is not acceptable for the management of a sector which is the most important sector in determining the future of our people and the prospects of our country. That's it for today. I want to thank you all for tuning in. I wanted to share the link for this video on Facebook and comment and tell us what you want us to tackle next week. And let me say this finally. Congrats to Raheem Sterling being the 29th FIFA Footballer of the Year. It's our youth. And, well, Manchester City, I have to say, is who I expect to win the Premiership.